friends, and welcome to the Lovely Place channel. The channel that's like a box of chocolates because you never know what you're going to get. Today's film is the fourth episode of the Dobies seed story in 2024. Episode 3 was at the start of May, and here we are, only midway through the month, and there's been so much activity, it's time to make a new film. The start of the year was very slow, but things are finally taking off in the garden. There's absolutely no sign as yet of any of the cornflowers, stock or phlox in the bottle garden, which is now just a mass of buttercups, thistles, nettles, ground elder and dockens. If you look closely, you can spot a few flag iris and some alliums that are struggling against the weeds. As I mentioned in episode 3, the difficulty with the bottle garden is that I have my spring bulbs here, but the ground is also full of weeds and mice. Every time I try to weed, I end up trampling the bulbs or pulling up the wrong plant, and all that activity just stimulates the weeds to grow more vigorously. So this time I'm using a different method. I'm just going to plant the stuff I want on top of the weeds and see what happens. I don't mind the mice really, as they are great food for the badgers and birds of prey that are in the garden. This is badger activity. They've been snuffling for slugs and snails on the lawn, and they leave holes. I've got 2 tyres and an inner tube, so I laid these on top of the weeds and filled them with compost. Our new washing machine was wrapped in polystyrene, so I filled the sides of the bigger tyre with this to save on compost. I'll have to see how it turns out. While I was at the garden centre getting the compost, I couldn't resist getting some bean seedlings, as my own are so far behind. After all, for £1.50, what's the worst that can happen? Well, slugs are what happens. The beans around the telegraph pole have been completely destroyed. I've planted the area again with the sprouts that I grew myself. Here's a millipede. In the UK, they're harmless. Most millipedes are detritivores and feed on decomposing vegetation, feces, or organic matter mixed with soil. They often play important roles in the breakdown and decomposition of plant litter. This one is sleeping, so I popped him back. The sweet pea plants are struggling, and there's no sign of any of the seeds sprouting that I planted at the same time, I'm afraid. The beans in the tyres are also getting assaulted by slugs, except for the ones in the inner tyre. I think the slugs and snails are hiding under the rim of the tyres, and as the inner tube doesn't have a rim, these ones are doing better. It's good to know for next year. Today I'm protecting the plants from slugs with copper tape that is quite easy to get off the internet. It works well on my pots of delphiniums and hostas, and if you stick it to a clean, dry surface, it lasts for years. I got this piece of hose that's around 6 foot long, and I've put 2 strips of copper tape down it and joined it up with a bit of bamboo. I plan to put this round the telegraph pole. The problem is that the slugs and snails might be able to get over or under as the ground is uneven, but we shall see if it helps. Here's a little story about a slug. Around 10 years ago, I took my laptop outside to listen to some music. Then a day later, it suddenly and unexpectedly stopped working. I took it to be fixed, and when they opened it up, they found that a tiny slug had crawled inside through the ventilation ducts and had had a wander around until it formed a bridge across some of the chips and electrocuted itself. This is how copper tape works, apparently. The slugs and snails don't like the electricity that they generate when they touch it. The issue with my laptop was that my insurance company had to give me a new laptop on a technicality. Had the creature that crawled inside got 6 legs or more like a beetle or a spider, then I wouldn't have been covered. But as a slug only has 1 foot and is a mollusk, they had to give me a whole new laptop. I expect they've changed the clause on the policy by now. Anyway, back to gardening. Unfortunately, the copper tape was no good on the rubber tyres, so I put it round the bottom of the actual plants and canes, and we shall see if it makes any difference. Here's a little check on the raised bed. In the last episode, I just pulled the leaves off the weeds rather than dig them up. I still haven't managed to harvest the asparagus. One of the peonies is in full bloom, just waiting for the others. The broad beans are around 1 foot high, but I don't see much sign of the peas I planted at the same time. I have a few beans and peas still left to plant. When they're a little larger, I'll fit them into this area if I can. The few seeds I planted in March were really disappointing, so I sowed more seeds over the top. That was in episode 3. And planned to leave them outside to harden off. So as you can see here, the fresh sowing has already sprouted. And then there's the oyster leaf plants. Still very, very disappointing, I'm afraid. The broad bean plants in the pots are straggly. I wonder if they will make any beans at all. And the sunflower seeds from episode 3 have sprouted, but they're also very straggly. So I'm leaving them outside now to harden off. So this is the situation in the middle of May. In a month's time, we'll be at the longest day of the year. So please stay tuned to see how things progress in the garden. Thanks very much for watching till the end. Happy gardening, everyone. Bye for now.